My name is Adam Jones. I'm Vice President for Customer Services with Agile Frameworks. And thank you for joining us for our MetaField educational series. This first session going over our form designer. Just a few things to note here at the beginning. In my role, I'm overseeing all of our customer interactions through our solutions consultants, project managers, and support. I've had an opportunity to meet many of you over the phone and in person, and for those of you that I haven't, I look forward to in the coming months. This is going to be a series that we're going to be providing to our customers every 4 to 6 weeks. We have a number of ideas on items and areas of the application that we'd like to cover, but we very much want to solicit feedback from our customer base on items that you would see value from learning a little bit more about MetaField, getting more value out of the application. Some of these sessions will be technical based, digging into the application, learning a little bit more. Some of it might be related to industry best practices. We're very open to this, but we want to provide this as a value add to our customer base so you can better use MetaField in your day-to-day work. One thing to note is that there is going to be a survey for this webinar. It may have already popped up on your web browser, or it may pop up when you close out the Zoom meeting. We very much would appreciate if you can take just the 1 to 2 minutes. It'll take you to complete that survey. It'll really help us moving forward to allow you to get better use out of these. And again, if you have ideas for things you'd like to see moving forward, please enter them into the Q&A bar or the chat bar in the Zoom meeting, or you can reach out to your solutions consultant and let them know of things you'd like to see in future meetings. One thing to note, we are going to have a Q&A portion at the end. If we can't get to all the questions, we will be able to see who submitted those, so we'll have your solutions consultant reach out to you at a later time to address those questions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Wick, who's going to be performing the session today.
Thank you, Adam. Well, hello, everybody. Again, my name is Brad Wick. I am a solutions consultant here at Agile Frameworks. I imagine there's a handful of you out there that either recognize my name or my voice anyway. But for those of you that don't, either or, it's great to have you. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with us. So we're excited about this. So just a few things before we get into it. The topic today is form designer. And a couple things that I wanted to go over is that, for one, this is going to be review for some of you. And for others, it's going to be some new material. Our goal with this is to really provide you some teachings and help give you confidence to do this yourself, or maybe improve some of your existing forms. Secondly, Form Designer really is a very powerful tool. And by powerful, I mean it's very configurable. So in such a case, if you pretend I'm maybe a mechanic, I could essentially use this tool to create a form that supports a 20-point car inspection. Or maybe if I'm a general manager of a grocery store, I could create a checklist to keep track of expiration dates on produce. Now, those examples may not be super relatable to your line of business, but that's kind of my point here. Because it's so configurable, it really demonstrates the wide range of where this tool could be applied. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is, as we kind of move along here, imagine different areas of your direct or even indirect business lines. Maybe it's environmental or non-destructive, or even if it's just internal, such as maybe a events coordinating department that you have. I mean, maybe they could create even a survey to get feedback on a recent holiday party you had. Maybe the food was good or the entertainment was good. There's really endless opportunities to create forms and capture data. So think about that as we move along, and just kind of imagine the tools and the power you have at your fingertips to support these areas of work with MetaField. And lastly, you'll hear me say the word form a lot. Now, what we want to do is kind of gear our minds into what a form means in terms of MetaField. A form essentially means that you're capturing data. It has nothing to do with a deliverable report. So we're not going to be covering anything in regards to a deliverable report during this session. We'll do that at another time. But for now, a form is going to be purely used to collect data. Now, whether all of that data or maybe just a little bit, whatever that data you collect, if it ends up on a deliverable report, that's entirely up to you. So again, you can capture data, and whatever you do with that data, it's up to you. Some of it can be reported. Some of it may just be for internal purposes. So with that, I thank you for bearing with me for my kind of introductory spiel there, but let's go ahead and begin. So today, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be using MetaField here to design a form. And the form that I'm going to be designing is going to be kind of a generic daily observation form. So we're going to see how we can use certain tools to track discrepancies, how we can insert some default text, and even put in some visualization rules to kind of optimize the workflow here. Now, the first thing that you'll notice, though, is that on my screen, I actually have 3 tabs of MetaField open. And those 3 tabs are really going to help me with kind of the best workflow to design a form. Because as I design this form within the administration module, I'm going to want to see what it looks like for my technicians or inspectors that are actually doing the true capturing of the data within the field module. So to begin, I'm going to use one tab here, and I'm going to go into administration. So we'll start with administration because this is where we're really going to be designing the form. So to begin, what we're going to do is within administration, we'll go over to the side here and we'll go into activity. Now, the activity tool really is, it's the module that we use to describe this do-it-yourself form tool. It's a generic term, but it's really meant to be generic because it's meant to describe any type of activity that you do out in the field to capture data. So that's why it's called activity over here. It's just a generic term. But where we're going to begin is if we click Forms. So the first thing that we see here are various groups. Now think of a group as kind of a folder or maybe a certain line of business. As you can see, there are a couple in there already. So just kind of a way to help categorize various forms that you do or various forms that support your line of business. What I'm going to do is just create a new group. And again, it's basically just a folder. So I'm going to come up to the right here and click Add Group. And I'm just going to call this group Observations. Oh, looks like we already got one. I'm going to call this one Observations and Inspections. Let's do that. There we go. So we have Observations and Inspections. Now you'll note when I click this parent folder, if you will, beneath it, we see that there are no forms within it. It's because I haven't defined one yet. Now, if I were to click on a different one, maybe if we do monitoring, looks like there's one in there right there. It's just kind of a test one. But let's go back to our parent folder here, Observations and Inspections, and we'll see how this kind of plays out once we get into the field module. But now what I want to do is add a single form into that group. So let's go ahead and define our new form. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're just going to make kind of a generic observation form here. So that's what we're going to call it now. And all I'm doing right here is just defining what the name of my form is. So the system name, you'll see this pop up a little bit as we move along. The system name really is just kind of a way for the database to define uniqueness. So you'll see that come into play here as we move along, but it will auto type for you as you create something. So let's go ahead and hit save. So now that you can see, I've created my observation form. So now if I click off of my parent folder here and go back to the same one, now I have an existing form there. So we've defined the form so far, but what we haven't done is add any fields into that form. So that would be our next step. So now what we want to do is if I click this form, I'm going to drill down into the form and we'll be able to add fields to it. So now that I've defined it, let's go ahead and click it. So now, as you can see, what we have are the fields for this observation form right here. Now, anytime you create a new form in the system will automatically create 3 fields to support that form. The system needs these 3 fields at a very minimum to exist in the database. So that's why these populated already. But to give you an idea of what this looks like, now what I'm going to do is open up one of my other tabs. So I'm going to move my cursor up to the top here, and we're going to start from the beginning. So I still have my one tab open up here in administration, but now let's kind of pretend to be the field technician or the inspector, who's ever going to be doing the work. So if I click field here and go into activity, this is where I'm going to find the form that I'm building. Because again, we started in activity within administration. So this is the area that we want to begin. So when I click activity and go to create a new one, we should see my group. Here it is, observations and inspections, the one that I just added a few minutes ago. And if I click this and expand it, now we can see here that here's my observation form. This is the one that we're working on within administration. So let's go ahead and click this and see what it looks like so far. So here's our form. Again, I use the term form, and that means that we're going to be capturing data. So this is essentially the form that we're looking at. So now we have an activity number, a date, and a technician. These 3 fields right here are the same 3 fields that are coming from administration. So the next step that we want to do is build this out. We're going to add fields to this. But before I do that, there's one more thing that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to go back out to the kind of the high level here. So I'm going to click forms again. And I just want to show you this real quick. So again, we're on our observations and inspections group, but you'll notice down here with the form that we're going to be working with here, notice that there's a status called draft. This is pretty crucial because this allows you to tweak and add fields to this form when it's in draft status without having to have your field technicians enter it. In other words, you can tweak this as much as you want until it's ready for production. And once it is ready for production, then you can come in here and promote it to active. In this case, when it's active, now your field technicians will have access to this form and they can enter data. So when it's in draft status, you can safely tweak it and add to it and make edits to it with confidence, knowing that there's not going to be any data entered into that form. So let's go ahead though, and let's click this form and let's start adding some fields to it. So to add fields now, what we're going to do is we're going to scroll over to the right-hand side of our screen, and we're just going to simply click this Add Field button. So when I click this, I'm going to get this little window, and this is going to pop up every time when I create a new field for this form. So let's say for the first one here, I'm going to just call this one mileage, because maybe I want to track the amount of mileage my inspector puts on the truck or drives to and from the site. So now once we've defined the label, now we want to tell the system, well, what type of data is this going to be that we're capturing? So when we open up the type, there's going to be a different number of field types that we can work with here. You know, maybe it's a pick list, or maybe it's a date field. Well, in this case, if we're tracking mileage, it kind of makes sense to me that maybe it should just be a number. So I'm going to choose a number field. But the nice thing is once you choose your field, in terms of the type, you're going to have different settings that you can apply. So now if I come down here and click the settings button, this green add button, because I chose a number field, now I can tell the system to apply certain settings to this. So maybe what I want to do is allow for decimals to be entered. Or maybe I just want to add some helper text with it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is add some helper text. So I'm just going to say, enter total miles round trip. That way, I'm telling the technician to enter in the total amount of miles for the whole trip. So once I hit save and save that field, we can see that now I've created a new field for this form. So again, kind of an optimal workflow here. What we want to do is use our other tab and go back to the screen within the field module because we want to see what it's going to look like for the field technician. So we do want to do kind of a quick refresh. So I'm going to back out and pretend like I'm adding an activity again. So you're going to see me do this kind of workflow over and over again throughout this demonstration. So I'm going to click on my observation form, and all of a sudden here, we now have a new field on our form. So we can see that it's a mileage, there's the label, and here's my helper text. Just a supporting narrative to help define what the technician should do. And you can see here, now I can enter in a number to support that field. So we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep building this form out. So let's do another one. Let's capture hours on site. So maybe here, I want to do another number. But in this case, maybe we want to allow capturing of fractions of an hour in terms of billing purposes. So maybe what we want to do is add some decimal places. So I'm going to allow 2 decimal places and hit save. And then I'm going to add some helper text again, because what I want the technician to do is round this, because I want to go at the nearest quarter hour. So I might do, please round to the nearest quarter hour. Okay? So now again, we've added some decimal places and a little helper text. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit save. So here's our new field within administration. But let's again see what this looks like from a field perspective. So if I click observation form, all of a sudden, there we go, we have another one. And here, if you see, I can also enter in decimals, because I told the system that we can allow up to 2 decimals. Now, if I enter in a third, it's going to raise a validation. It did that because I limited the system to only adding 2. So let's keep chipping away here. Let's do this real quick. So let's look at the 3 fields that the system inserted automatically: the activity number, the date, and the technician. Maybe instead I don't want this to be called technician. Maybe if the form that I'm configuring here, they go by the name inspector. What I can do is change the label of that. So I'll click the edit icon over here and change this to inspector. So now once I save, we can see that the label now says inspector. So you can always come back and make edits to the fields that you've added, just simply using this pencil icon to edit those fields. So you can always come back and tweak things later on if you want. Let's do one more here. So let's do inspector certification number. So let's do this one. Let's do a text box. So you'll notice here too, I usually get a lot of questions. What's the difference between a text area and a text box? You'll see what the difference is, but in short, think of a text area as a way to support a longer narrative. You're going to get some rich text editing tools such as bulleting and center alignment, where a text box, that's maybe just for kind of a short sentence or two. You're not going to have that rich text editing. So we're going to do a text box because I want the inspector to be able to enter in their certification number. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save there. So let's quick look at this because I want to see how I changed the name of technician to inspector, and I want to see my new field. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into field here. We'll do our refresh. So now we can see, there it is. I've changed the name of technician to inspector, and we also have the inspector certification number. Now, maybe what I just realized, though, is if the inspector field is here, maybe I want to put the inspector certification number right up next to it, because it doesn't make sense to kind of separate them by a few different fields. I can do that back in administration. So let's quick do that. So what I'm going to do is use this button right here called Reorder Fields. So when I click this, I'm going to get presented all of the fields that are on the form currently, and all it is just to drag and drop. So if I click this inspector certification number field and bring it right up next to inspector and hit save, you can see here that it's switched within my administration screen. And now if we do another quick refresh, we should see that we have inspector number right below inspector. So it kind of makes sense. So maybe if you're building something out and you kind of forget a field, you can always go back and reorder them appropriately. Okay, let's keep going away. So let's do, let's maybe say we want to capture weather. But in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to do it in a multiple choice field. So let's do this. So I'm going to choose multiple choice. But now what I have to do is tell the system, okay, what are my choices that I'm going to provide to the inspector to choose from? So because I chose multiple choice, now I'm going to be able to provide options within that multiple choice field. So I can go ahead and click this add button here. And all I have to do is basically just define them, give them a label. So what I can do here is click or type in sunny. I'll do rainy. Do a good number of these. We'll say maybe there's some snow, windy, dry. So you can add a whole bunch of these if you want. And let's just say other, because maybe there's some crazy weather that that hits and it's not available as a choice. So let's go ahead and select save and see what this looks like. So again, I'm going to go back to my form and do a refresh. So here's our multiple choice. Now another thing you can do, I mentioned, you can always go back and tweak your existing fields. So maybe I want to present this as a pop-up, which actually might make a little more sense because we always have to kind of imagine ourselves as the field technician, maybe on a mobile device. So I'm obviously sharing my screen on my laptop, but the field module here is optimized to display appropriately on a mobile device. So maybe it makes a little more sense to display this as a pop-up. So let's do a quick change here. So I'm going to go back to my edit screen and I'm going to add a setting to it. So maybe I go to this. If I want to display this as a pop-up, so I'm going to flag yes for the field module. Notice that it's separated between modules, so I can control how it's presented to the field technician or inspector, and also how it's presented in terms of maybe the project manager who's ever doing the review and quality control. So I'm going to hit save, and I just want to show you what this looks like now as a pop-up. So I'll do my refresh again. And now you can see here, it says choose options. So when I click this, now there's kind of a nice little pop-up here. So it might make a little more sense to present that in that kind of display for your technicians. All right, let's do a fun one here. So you'll notice again that on one of these fields, I added the option of other. Okay, what if the technician or the inspector chooses other? I want to know what other is. So what we can do now is add a field to support that. So what we're going to do is call this one weather again, but maybe in parentheses, I'm going to add other. And I'm going to make this a text box because I want them to be able to type in what type of weather they're experiencing. So now we've done that, but this is kind of where it gets, you can really kind of start to get creative here and really optimize your workflow. I'm going to add some visualization rules to this. So in other words, this field is only going to display if the inspector chooses other in the field module. So if you're familiar with, say, with maybe Excel, there's a lot of expressions here that, that you can use at your hand. A lot of them are very, very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and select edit here for visualization. And these are my expressions that I can use over here. These are all the tools that I can use. But now if we look over here, all of these fields should look familiar. These are the ones that I've been adding to this form. So what we want to do is I'm going to add a visualization to look up if a technician chooses other. So I'm going to use the contain expression. And the next thing I can do is apply. I can say, all right, if a technician or inspector chooses from the weather field and that value is other, this field is going to display. So I'm going to click weather. Just type it in here. So I'll do weather. It kind of gives you a hint of how to build this out. So it's telling me which field I should choose and then what the value is. So if you remember, I want to do value here. So I'm going to put other. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to hit done. And the system will kind of flag you if you got a typo in there, or it's gonna not save appropriately. But if you got a little typo, you can always come back to it. So I've added my visualization and I'm going to hit save. So here's my weather field if somebody chooses other. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. And hopefully I did this one right here. So let's go ahead and hit add activity, do our refresh. So here we are. So here's our weather field. Now let's see what happens when I choose other. So I'll click this, and all of a sudden there, now we have a new field to work with. But that's only going to display if I choose other as part of my weather field. So you can really kind of reduce the noise, or in other words, unneeded fields based on a workflow above. It helps kind of reduce the amount of fields or display or screen real estate space for the technician. It's really, really powerful tool. All right, so let's go back to admin and let's keep working away here. And let's show a data source one. So in this example, what I'm going to do is add a location field because I want to know where this work is being performed. So in this example, what we're going to do is I'm going to choose a pick list. So when I choose a pick list, it's going to basically be a drop down for the technician or inspector to work with. However, what I want to do is source a different area of the system that already has locations in it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep this screen open on this tab, but I just want to show you, I'm going to go up to this tab here, and we're going to go into administration. Now under the general queue, or the general tab here, there's a sub-tab called locations. Now this is where you store all your locations based on the work that you do. Now it's broken down by different disciplines within the system. So you'll notice there's a column here called use an activity. What I want to do is be able to pull, or in other words, populate my pick list that I'm designing right now and source all of these fields to that pick list. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click a few of these to get this to work because I want to apply this to activity. And now I'm going to go back to my other tab here where we started building out our form. So as I mentioned, what I want to do is source this pick list. So I'm going to add a setting to it, and I'm going to apply the data source to it. So once I click data source, it's going to tell me, okay, what values do you want to source in this pick list? So if you scroll down a little bit, there's actually a little value there called activity locations. And activity locations, what I'm doing is I'm telling the system to basically look up on this tab, this list in administration. So when I go into field here and then do another refresh, I should be able to see these locations that are populated in that pick list. I didn't have to manually type all of these. It's just going to dynamically populate. So now let's go back to field here and take a peek. So here's our location. And once I click this pick list, looks like now we have a few of them in there already. So it's a really powerful tool. It's a nice time saver anyway in terms of populating pick lists. All right, let's do one more real quick. Make some progress here. We'll do a temperature one. We want to know the temperature. I'll probably make this one a number 2. Okay, so we'll add a couple here. Let's do work performed, because now I want to get into the details of the actual work being performed. So I'm going to call this one exactly that. And I'm also going to make this one a pick list. I'm going to let the inspector choose what type of work they're doing. So I'm going to put some examples here. They may or may not be relative to your business, but we'll just add some examples. Concrete placement here. Maybe we'll do some fireproofing. Maybe let's do a rebar inspection. And let's maybe do other again, because if it's not on the list, we want the technician or inspector to be able to tell us, well, what kind of work did you do? So I'll do other again. And of course, you can add as much of work you want. I only did a few, but you can add as much as you want there. So what I'm going to do now is hit save. So I added a couple fields there. I did temperature and work performed. So now let's do a refresh. We should see both of those fields pop up in the field menu here. So here we are. There's my temperature field. And here's work performed. Oh, got a little typo there. So I can go back and fix that one. So if I choose other though, similar to what we did when we were looking at weather, I probably want to add a visualization rule there that allows another field to pop up. Okay, what type of work is other than? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll do the same thing. I'll come up to my add field button here, and I'm going to call this work performed if other. And I'm going to make this one, let's see, I'll do another text box here. We'll do a text area here shortly. But again, what we want to do is add a visualization to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that contain one. That's a very powerful one, especially when you're choosing something from a pick list or a multiple choice. So now what I want to do is do work performed. And this is kind of my guide down here of all the fields that I've been working with. So under work performed, that's my field. Now what is the option that they choose that's going to make this field pop up? So it's going to be other. So we'll go back up. Other. A bit of a typo there. There we go. So now I've added that visualization rule to it. So once I hit save, go back to our field here. And now if I choose other, now the inspector has the ability to tell me what is other, what type of work are you doing. Another powerful tool with that visualization expression is you can display certain fields that apply to certain pieces of work. So in other words, let's say somebody chooses that the work performed is an anchor inspection. Okay, well maybe there's a certain couple of fields that I need to know specifically if they choose their work performed to be anchor inspection. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to add another field, but to apply another visualization rule that's only going to display if somebody chooses anchor inspection as the work performed. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is the one that I'm going to make a text area. So let's call this one anchor inspection remarks. So now we're going to choose a text area. But in this case, what I'm going to do is actually add some default text into this. And this default text tool is really powerful because it helps reduce the amount of typos that maybe technicians or inspectors enter. It helps create consistency in terms of what you're delivering on your reports. It's basically a canned response, and you can insert placeholders. So rather than have the technician enter in a whole narrative, if there's only maybe a couple of pieces of data that they need to enter within that narrative, it's a big time saver. So let's show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to come down to my settings button here, and I'm going to choose default text this time. And there's a little thing in blue that's going to help you show you how to insert these placeholders that a technician can populate. And we'll see what this looks like in the field of module after I type this in. So let me just do one here. I'm going to do I observed, and we're going to put these in double brackets because that's what the blue banner is telling me. That's how I create these dynamic placeholders. I'm going to call it a number. I want to know how many we observed. I observed number anchors during today's work. So now I'll hit save. Okay. So I've added some default text to this, but again, what I want to do is I only want this field to display if somebody's actually doing an anchor inspection. There's no point in showing this if the work that they performed was a rebar inspection. So if I click visualization rules, I'm going to add another visualization. So we'll use my contain one. I'm going to be using this one quite a bit. So now what we're going to do is click my work performed. Oops. Let's do this. We'll go and let's see, anchor inspection. There we go. So once we've added that now let's take a peek and see what this looks like. So I'm going to go back and refresh one more time. Click observation form. So now what we should see is if somebody chooses an anchor inspection, now that dialog pops up. And you can see that because of that default text, I'm already saving the inspector time. They don't have to type this in on their phone. The only thing that they need to do is tell me how many did you observe. So maybe it's 5, and I just hit replace, and there we go. So it's a really powerful tool, again, to help create consistency, help save on typos and review. It's almost like a canned response that you can just insert. So a big time saver there. So let's maybe do one more of those real quick, because I just want to show you how you can really separate these out. So let's see what other type of work that I have. My pick list, that was concrete placement. So let's add another remark that supports only concrete placement. So we'll call this concrete placement remarks. And we'll make this a text area as well. So let's do some more default text. We'll do kind of the same narrative here. Do my double brackets because that's what the blue banner is telling me. All right, so there's my default text. But now what I want to do is add that visualization. And actually what I'm going to do is show you what it looks like if I don't add it. So if I hit save now and do a quick refresh, now we can see here that we have concrete placement remarks. Well, I haven't selected any work yet, but that is already displaying. So if you don't add those visualization rules, all of your fields are going to display. So you can kind of see how it helps reduce the noise when you're adding visualization rules. So if I choose anchor inspection, well, now that one pops up. But maybe we want to make sure that this one hides unless somebody actually does choose concrete placement marks. So we'd have to add that back to our visualization rules. Well, let's do that real quick. And this is kind of the steps here. That's one of the reasons why you have a draft status to work with. It's going to take some tweaking, and you really want to put on the hat of both the form designer person and the person that's actually going to be doing the data collection, because you really want to fine tune it and tweak it to make it as simple and easy as possible for them when they're entering data. So let me add my visualization rule here. To contain, and this time we want to do the concrete placement. Let's go like this. This is a little easier for me. And now we'll do, oops, I'm goofing up here. Let's try this one more time. Work performed. There we go. All right, there we go. That should work. So I'll hit done. Oops. What did I screw up there?
Typo.
Must have been a typo. All right, let's try it one more time. Okay. All right, so concrete placement of this, we should go. All right, we're getting there, folks. There we go. My apologies. All right, so now we can go back and take a peek at it. So now if we choose our work performed and it's a concrete placement, now we've configured that correctly. All right, so now one of the big things and one of the more powerful tools that you can use MetaField for is tracking discrepancies. In other words, when you flag a discrepancy in the system, it's going to show up in your dashboard. You can create a discrepancy report. You can create a pending field action, essentially. If a discrepancy is flagged, the scheduler will know that something else in the field needs to be addressed. Well, how do we go about telling the system to track discrepancies? We're going to show you. So one of the ways that we want to do this is set it up so we have the ability to track multiple discrepancies. So what I'm going to be doing now is creating a data grid, essentially. But first, I just want to know overall, is there at least one discrepancy, or is there a discrepancy out in the system? So it's kind of a yes or no question. So let's go ahead and click Add Field. And I'm just going to call this a discrepancy. I'm going to make this a yes/no field. So I'm asking the inspector here, is there a discrepancy out there? I'm just going to hit save. So I've added that field there. Now what I'm going to be doing is adding a data grid. So the data grid is a very, very powerful tool. So we'll come up here again, we'll click add field, and I'm going to just call this one discrepancies. So it's a data grid to track discrepancies. And when I say data grid, think of it as more of just almost like a table, a way to capture multiple rows or multiple records within one field to collect all of this data. So a data grid is essentially made up of rows and columns. So I'm going to choose my field type, and here it is right here, data grid. And I'm going to hit save. There is one thing that I want to quick do, and it's another visualization rule though. If somebody says that there's no discrepancies, well, I don't want to display a data grid that collects or tracks discrepancies. I only want to display it if there truly is a discrepancy. So I'm going to add a visualization rule there. So we'll come up and we'll find the field that I just added, my discrepancy one. I just want this to display if somebody says, yes, there is a discrepancy. Okay? So let's take a peek and see what this looks like here. Observation form. So now here's my little yes, no toggle. So if I say yes, there is a discrepancy on this work being performed, you can see how there's a little button now that pops up, discrepancies. This is my data grid. If I click this though, there's not going to be anything to work with because I haven't added any fields within that data grid. So that's the next step that we would need to do. Now, if we go back to administration here, you'll see again, here's my data grid field. If I click this row on the data grid field, you'll see that there's a whole new grid to work with. What I'm essentially doing here is working kind of with the parent to child relationship. So I'm going to be able to tell the system, okay, what fields are going to be included in this data grid? Or in other words, what column headers do I want to populate in this table? Again, that's kind of what a data grid is here. So now I want to do that. So let's go ahead, instead of using the parent level for adding fields, now we want to use kind of the child level because we're working within the data grid. So to add fields within the data grid, it's the same kind of feature. I just click add field down here. So let's do this. So now what we want to do is let's say discrepancies observed. Again, I want to know if there is a discrepancy in the system. And what we want to do is make this a yes or a no field because you need to tell the system if there really is a discrepancy out there. And there's a key setting here that we want to apply to this field. It's called the discrepancy indicator. Now, when I see this, it's going to basically tell me how to configure it. So if somebody's going to say, yes, there is a discrepancy, well, the system wants to know that, okay, this truly is a discrepancy and I need to flag this for a dashboard or a pending field action. This is how you go about configuring it. So I'm going to make this field, if somebody says, yes, there's a discrepancy, this is what's going to trigger all of that. So I've added that field there. And let's go ahead and hit save. So now I've added my yes or no field. Well, next what I want to do is I want to know what the what maybe the number is, because I want to be able to track that. So I can actually apply a discrepancy number to that discrepancy. That way I can kind of identify uniqueness on a per project basis. What discrepancy on this project? Is it number 1, number 2, number 3? I can configure that. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to call this one discrepancy number. And we're going to make it a number field. And we're going to apply some settings to it. Now, there are going to be more settings that you want to apply to this to really make it work. So you don't have to be an expert at it right off the bat. There is documentation in our help pages that will tell you how to set this up. So if you don't remember after I show you, you'll have a resource to go to, and this is being recorded as well. So you'll be able to watch and listen and learn on your own afterwards. So let's go ahead and apply these settings though. So the first thing that I want to do is make it auto-generated. So basically what I'm going to tell the system, if there's a discrepancy, I want an auto-generated number. And I want to separate these numbers by project. Again, is this discrepancy 1, 2, or 3 on this unique project? So I'm going to do a project here, and I'll hit save. The other one that I want to add here is called auto-generate only if visible. And really what that means is it's basically telling the system only generate a number if there really is a discrepancy. So that's why I want to apply this one too. Auto-generate only if there's a discrepancy. What we'll also want to do is disable this field, because if it's an auto-generated number, well, we don't want anybody changing that number because it's almost like an ID. You know, it's a way to identify uniqueness for the system. If the system tells me that this is discrepancy number 5, well, I don't want anybody changing it to make it discrepancy number 6 or 7. I want to lock this down. So I'm going to disable this. So I'm just going to say it's disabled, and yes, we're going to make that as true, the disabled feature for the modules here. So now I'll hit save. And finally, what I want to do is add one more. And this one's called clear upon copy. Basically what this does is when you save an activity record or when you copy a record within a data grid, you don't want to duplicate what you just did, especially if it's a number. So what we're going to tell the system to do is if I just log discrepancy number 6 and I go to copy that, well, I don't want the system to create another discrepancy 6. I want that to be cleared out. So now I'm going to hit save there. So I've put a number of settings there. Again, if you don't remember them, that's okay. You'll have resources to go back to this. But now I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And let's take a look now. So I'm going to do a refresh. I'll do add activity again, observation form. So here's my discrepancy. Is there a discrepancy in this work? I'm going to hit yes. And here is my data grid now that just popped up based on my visualization rule. And last time when I clicked this, I didn't have any fields in here yet. So this time when I click it, I should see some things to work with. So I'll click it and look at that. Now we have some fields to work with. So again, think of each one of these fields as almost like a header in a table. And if you wanted to add more rows to the table, maybe there's multiple discrepancies, you can come up here and add a new record. So basically each time I'm doing this, I'm telling the system that, yep, there's another record here or another row in this table. So that's how you can add multiple pieces of data within one field. But this discrepancy tracking isn't complete quite yet. What we need to do is basically be able to tell a status of the discrepancy. Is it open or is it closed? So that's the next piece here. So we're going to go to add another field to this data grid. And I'm just going to call this one a status because I want to know what the status of this discrepancy is. And I'm going to make this a pick list because I'm going to give options as either open or closed. So I have to tell the system that first. So I'm going to choose these options here. I'm going to define them. I'm going to do just type in open. It's kind of like when we were adding weather, if it was sunny or if it was rainy, kind of the same thing here. I'm also going to add close because those are the two statuses that I want to track. Now it's kind of like the discrepancy indicator. If you remember that yes, no field when we were telling the system that, okay, yeah, there is a discrepancy out there. I should flag that for the dashboard. And if there's, and for a pending field action, something out in the field needs to be reevaluated. Now I need to tell the system what the status is because right now we only provided options, but the system doesn't know how to connect those quite yet. We want to tell the system to connect the dots there. So now what we're going to do is click the settings button. And you'll notice here, I have a couple of options to work with. There's a discrepancy status closed indicator and an open. So if I choose close, now I can just apply it to one of the options that I just created. Obviously I want to do open there, or excuse me, closed. So I'll hit save. And then let's add the other one. Let's connect the dots for the open one. Discrepancy status open indicator. And we'll apply it to open there. So now again, what I've done is I've created an ability or a way for the inspector to apply a status to the discrepancy. So if they're doing this work and they note a discrepancy and it's open, what I've just done is when they save this record now, it triggers the system that something needs to be addressed again on this activity. So I can either resend that same inspector out another day to reevaluate, or maybe send a new technician or inspector out to reevaluate. That's really how you connect the dots here in terms of discrepancy tracking. So we'll go ahead and hit save there. Now let's do a couple more things with this data grid. What happens if this data grid is closed? Or excuse me, this discrepancy is closed. I want to know who closed it and what type of work they did to close it. So the first thing that I want to do is track when did they close it. So I'm going to call this a resolution date. I'll make this a date field and I'll add a few settings to it. So I'm going to do a default value. Basically what this is going to do, it's going to populate to the current date. That way they don't even have to select it. So I'm going to come down here and choose today. So I'll see that pop up here in just a minute. They don't have to pick from a list. It's just going to populate. All right, let's do one more. I want to know what the description of what type of work they did to resolve this. So we'll call this one resolution description, and we'll make this a text area. Okay. And actually what we want to do is maybe add some visualization rules to this as well, because we only want this to display if the discrepancy is actually closed. So if the status is closed, this field will display. And what's kind of nice, if you're doing the same rule for multiple ones, you can copy it and hit save. So if I go back to my resolution date one, maybe I want to apply the same visualization there. I can just copy and paste. Nice little time saver. All right. So now let's do a quick review. Do another refresh here real quick. Click observation form. So here's my discrepancy tracking data grid. We'll open this guy up. So is there a discrepancy? Yes, there is. Maybe if we do open, closed, and now we can see here that if I choose closed, it's going to allow me to enter in information about how did I close this. And if I wanted to, I could even do another field here to add maybe who closed it. I want to know who the technician is that closed it. I'd be able to enter in a value there. So very powerful tool. Just a few more things here that I want to show you that you can do. I'm going to go back to my form designer in admin. And now what I want to do is create another data grid to capture images, because it really is helpful if you're able to take a picture of something to support what you're describing or what type of work you're doing. So now what I'm going to do is create a new data grid. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to come up to my parent field. I'm going to stop working in this discrepancy data grid. I'm going to come up here, click add field, and I'm going to call this one images. And I'm going to select data grid here. And I'm just going to save it. I'm not going to add any settings to it. But now what I want to do is click off of my discrepancies data grid and go to my images. You can see here now there's no fields yet in my new data grid called images. So what we want to do now is be able to upload an image. So let's create a field for that. I'll label it as image, but now I'm going to choose a file upload field. So this is going to allow somebody to either take a picture with their mobile device or even look up in their camera roll and populate one here. And because it's in a data grid, it's going to allow me to capture multiple images, not just one. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And I'll do just a couple more here real quick. I'll do an image date, because I want to know when it was taken. And you could do another default value there. We'll skip that one for now. Finally, I want to know maybe who took the photo. So we'll do, let's see, let's do a pick list here. And we'll do another lookup, because I want to be able to source all of my technicians. I want it to look up myself. So we'll come down here, and if you remember, this is the same tool that we use to look up the locations. Well, in this example, we can look up our existing list of technicians. So if I hit save there, I can also add a default value. So what I can do is say, yep, I want it to populate to the current user logged in. So in other words, my name is going to pop up in this list automatically. I don't have to choose it from a pick list. So let's see what this looks like. So if we go find my form here, click observation form, here are all the fields that we've been working with. We'll come down and here we are. Here's my new images data grid. If I select it, you can see now I have an upload feature. So if I click this, I'd be able to take a picture and look up in my system and apply that, or I can look at my camera roll. I can choose the date here, and you can also choose the photographer. If I wanted to add multiple images, I can just come up here and click add new record, and now I can add multiple images within this single data record. So finally here, let's just add 2 more fields because my form is just about done. I'm just going to kind of do a general remarks one. We'll make this a text area field. Won't put any settings on there. And we'll do one more. We'll call this one attachment. And we'll make this another file upload field. Maybe there's some type of supporting document that I want to upload with this activity. So I'll hit save there. So now what we can do is I'm actually going to save this. So we'll do a refresh one more time real quick. And I'm going to enter in some information here. So a lot of it will just kind of be some dummy data. But I want to be able to save this record now. So I'm going pretty quick. I know we're starting to get close to the end of our time here. So I'm not going to save, let's do a discrepancy. Click discrepancies here and let's do one. So I'm going to say that this one is open. All right. So now I'm going to save this record. Oops, looks like I got to add one because that's a required field. All right. Good old stock image. So now I'm going to save the field, or excuse me, save the form. It's telling me now that I've saved activity 1 on this project. So that's the first activity for my daily observation here on this project. So now I'll be able to see that within quality control. So now if I go to quality control here and open up activity, I'll find the project. And we can see, here's my observation form, the one that I just saved. It just came in, it's that fast, it's real time. So you can see, here's my date, 8/8, you can see the location. And if I wanted to, I could edit it here. And I can kind of get the bird's eye view of the form that I just designed. So this is the QC version of the form that I designed. So again, all of these fields that we see here, they're coming from the form designer area. So there really is basically endless ways to capture data. If you'll notice, we still have done nothing in regards to a report. All we've done is just created a form to capture data. None of this data has gone out to a client, hasn't been delivered on a report. It's strictly just for review so far. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is one more really powerful tool. And I'm going to cancel out of this screen here real quick. So one of the more powerful tools comes down to the reviewing process. So again, we keep talking about data collection. And when you have data at your fingertips, you have the ability to search and query and kind of narrow things down based on filters. Well, this review screen is very, very powerful as well. Now, if you'll notice here, this is the data grid that's going to separate all of your records. What you can do is actually control these headers here. So if there's this piece of information that you want to know about, without having to drill down to a specific form, you have the ability to populate that column. So maybe what I want to do is I want to know what the status of discrepancies are without having to open up a form. So in other words, if I open up this form right here and we scroll down, let's see, this field right here, you'll notice that the status is open. Well, the only way I was able to see that is if I opened up the data record itself. Well, what I can do is actually create a status column for that, or even a weather column. You can really get creative. That's also done within administration. So far, where we've spent time is within activity, building out a form. There's another sub-tab here called Search Results Display. Now, there's a number of tools to work with here, so I encourage you to play around with these a little bit. Again, it's not something you have to remember right now, but these are called out in our help documentation if you want to know more about what each one of these does. The one that I'm going to focus on right now is called QC Activity Search Results. So if I click this row, kind of like before when I was working in the form designer area, if I click the data grid, if I click that, I'm going to have another table to work with down here. So if we look real quick, we have activity number, date, location, location details, determination, and comments. These fields right here are basically the columns that we see at the top of the quality control data grid. So those are where those fields are coming from. But again, maybe I want to add to that. So let's come here and we'll click Add Field. Now at the very beginning, if you remember me talking about a system name, how it's kind of a way to identify uniqueness for the database, this is where it's going to come into play. And I can type by this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up the status, and I'm going to give it a label. So what I'm telling the system to do is pull the values from the status field that I created within the form. So if I do a quick refresh here on this screen, what we should see is all of a sudden we now have a discrepancy status column, and just like that, there's a value in there already. So it's an extremely powerful tool if you want a window into being able to see data at a high level. And what else we can do here is we can also add filters. So maybe what I want to do is I also want to be able to filter by weather. So if I do want to do that, I can come up to QC Activity Search Filter this time, and it behaves the exact same way. So if I click Add Field, and let's see, I think it was a pick list. There we go, let's do weather. Give it there. If I hit Save, and do a quick refresh within quality control, now all of a sudden I have a weather filter to work with. So it's a very, very, very powerful tool. You can control a lot with it in administration. So with that, that concludes my demo for a observation form. I hope you gained some knowledge, some tips and tricks. If you guys have any questions that we can't get to in time here, feel free to reach out to us and we'll go from there, but thank you for attending.
Yeah, just one final note. Again, you should see a survey pop up in your web browser. Check either Chrome, IE, Edge, Safari, whatever you're using. We really appreciate, the survey should only take about 1 to 2 minutes to complete. Would really appreciate your feedback. And again, let us know what you think. Let us know anything we can change, and let us know of any topics that you'd like to see in the future. So thanks very much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.